when I'm 80 years old, I want to have minimized the number of regrets that I have. I don't want to be 80 years old in a quiet moment of reflection, thinking back over my life and cataloging a bunch of major regrets. And so we're trying to invent new things, and we finally came across this idea of putting the third-party selection on the same detail pages, the same product detail pages that we had our own inventory on, our own retail inventory on. We called this marketplace, and it started working right away. So that resourcefulness of trying new things, figuring things out, what do customers really want, it pays off in everything. And it pays off even in your daily lives. How do you help your children? What's the right thing? My wife has a great saying. We let our kids use, even now they're 17 through 12, but even when they were 4, we would let them use sharp knives. And by the time they were, maybe 7 or 8, we would let them use certain power tools. And my wife, much to her credit, she has this great saying. She says, I would much rather have a kid with 9 fingers than a resourceless kid. And which I just think is a fantastic attitude about life.
30 years old in 1994 when you decided to start Amazon.com. You had a great job. I remember you had a great apartment on the Upper West Side.
Been married for a year.
You've been married for a year.
I had not been eating biscuits for 9 months.
And I'm just, how did you go through making the decision to drop what was a very good job and take this chance? It all seems very obvious now, right? This many years later that it paid off, but at the time it was not obvious.
No, it wasn't. And I did do a lot of soul searching. I went to my boss at the time, and I really liked my job. And I told my boss I was going to go do this thing, start an internet bookstore. And my wife I'd already told my wife, and she's like, "Great, let's go." And I said to my boss, I was going to do this. He's like, "This is a good idea." He said, "I think this is a good idea, but it would be an even better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job." And that sort of made some logical sense to me, and he convinced me to think about it for a couple of days. So I went away, and I was really trying to get my head around how to think about this. And I think, for me, the right way to make that kind of very personal decision, because those decisions are personal. They're not like data-driven business decisions. They are, what does your heart say? And for me, the best way to think about it was to project myself forward to age 80 and say, look, when I'm 80 years old, I want to have minimized the number of regrets that I have. I don't want to be 80 years old in a quiet moment of reflection, thinking back over my life and cataloging a bunch of major regrets. And I think that regrets, our biggest regrets, in most cases, you can murder somebody, okay, you'd regret that. But in most cases, our biggest regrets turn out to be acts of omission. It's paths not taken, and they haunt us. We wonder, what would have happened? I loved that person, and I never told them. And then they married somebody else. I didn't do this. And so that's the frame of mind that I put myself in. And once I did that, once I thought about it that way, it was immediately obvious to me. I knew that when I'm 80, I would never regret trying this thing that I was super excited about and failing. If it failed, fine. I would be very proud of the fact when I'm 80 that I tried. And I also knew that it would always haunt me if I didn't try. And so that would be a regret. It would be a 100% chance of a regret if I didn't try, and basically a 0% chance of regret if I tried and failed. So I think that's a useful metric for any important life decision. For me, adventure is you can choose. We all get to choose our life stories, and it's the choices that define us, not our gifts. Everybody in this room has many gifts. I have many gifts. You can never be proud of your gifts because they're gifts. They were given to you. You might be, tall, or you might be really good at math, or you might be extremely beautiful or handsome, or there are many gifts, and you can only be proud really of your choices because those are the things that you are acting on. And one of the most important choices that each of us has, and you know this just as well as I do, is you can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure. And when you're 80, which one of those things do you think you're going to be more proud of? You're going to be more proud of having chosen a life of service and adventure. You see this in your firefighting work and everything else you do, Robin Hood, and so on and so on. And I feel that is, for me, adventure is a shorthand way of thinking about that.
Got it. This is important to you, certainly in our personal lives, which is why we do all of these fun things, but it also plays an important role in, how you approach the businesses that you're involved in.
If you want to be an inventor of any kind, inventing a new service offering for customers or a new product or anything, being an inventor requires, because the world is so complicated, you have to be a domain expert. I mean, in a way, even if you're not at the beginning, you have to learn enough so that you become a domain expert. But the danger is once you become a domain expert, you can be trapped by that knowledge. And so inventors have this paradoxical ability to have that, 10,000 hours of practice and be a real domain expert and have that beginner's mind. Have that look at it freshly, even though they know so much about the domain. And that's the key to inventing. You have to have both. And I think that is intentional. I think all of us have that inside of us, and we can all do it, but you have to be intentional about it. You have to say, yeah, I am going to become an expert, and I'm going to keep my beginner's mind. When I was telling my friends my criteria, one of the ones that I would list was that I wanted a woman who could get me out of a third world prison. And my friends were like, what are your future plans? What? And I said, no, it's just a visualization for somebody really resourceful, because I think that you don't want to go through life with teammates who aren't resourceful. And so you do want to go through life with people who, if you need, could get you out of a third world prison.
Hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically speaking.
Yeah. So take a minute or two and sort of help us understand, what is Blue Origin up to?
Well, Blue Origin the vision for Blue Origin is millions of people living and working in space. And the key thing is we have to dramatically reduce the cost of access to space. Right now, space travel is very expensive. And the reason it's expensive is not hard to understand. It's because we throw the hardware away after each use. And so we need reusable rocket vehicles, and that's what Blue Origin is working on. We're working on making sure that we don't have to throw the plane away every time after you fly to your vacation destination. That would definitely increase the cost of your vacation. And so that's what we need to do, and we can do it. It's totally possible, and I think it's important. Yeah. First popularized by Arthur C. Clarke, who said all civilizations become spacefaring or extinct, and this is the kind of Plan B argument that when Earth is destroyed somehow, we better make sure that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. And I hate the Plan B argument. I think Plan B with respect to Earth being destroyed is make sure Plan A works. So we have sent robotic probes to every planet in this solar system. Believe me, this is the best one. We know that. It's not even close. My friends who say they want to move to Mars or something, I say, why don't you go live in Antarctica for a year first? Because it's a garden paradise compared to Mars. And so this planet is so amazing. It's a jewel in our solar system. And we have, if you take baseline energy usage on Earth and just compound it at a few % a year for just a few hundred years, you have to cover the entire Earth's surface in solar cells. So that's not going to happen. So we have two choices. We either go out into space, or we switch over to a civilization of stasis. And personally, I do not like the idea of stasis. We have, our grandchildren and their grandchildren will live in a much better world if they can continue to advance and develop and use more energy and all of the things that we've enjoyed for hundreds of years as a civilization of growth. I don't even really believe in stasis. I think things are either growing or shrinking. I think stasis is highly unusual and in real life doesn't exist. I don't even think liberty is consistent with the idea of stasis. I mean, if you get real stasis, somebody's going to have to tell you how many kids you can have, how much energy you can use. There'll be all kinds of things that just aren't consistent with liberty and freedom. So, but in space, we have, for all practical purposes, unlimited resources. We could have 1 trillion humans in the solar system, and still wouldn't be crowded. And so then if you had 1 trillion humans, you'd have 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts and 1,000 Da Vincis. And how cool would that be? But we have to go to space, and we have to go to space to save Earth. That's why this work is so important, and we don't have forever to do it. We've now gotten so big as a civilization on Earth that we kind of have to hurry. And so I believe that that really in a kind of a long time frame, the most important work I'm doing is Blue Origin and pushing forward to get humanity established in the solar system to solve world hunger. And I want you to do it in 5 years. You would properly reject the opportunity. You would say, look, it's not possible, it's not practical. But if I said, look, I want you to solve world hunger in 100 years, that's a job you'd take because it's a much more addressable problem. You can first create the conditions. You have time to create the conditions where then you can solve the problem. And so that's a very important way of thinking. And I find, and it works with everything. I mean, you have to back up and find the right time horizon for what you're trying to do. But at Amazon, we probably do most of our things. We expect to get some results in sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But we find a lot of our, other companies that compete against us in various ways, they're often trying to get things done in 2 or 3 years. And so we can do things that. If everything has to work in 2 to 3 years, then that limits what you can do. If you give yourself the breathing room to say, okay, I'm okay if it takes 7 years, all of a sudden you have way more opportunities.
You live a big life, right? And how do you
I get this question a lot. I get it. I teach senior executive kind of leadership classes at Amazon for our most senior execs, and I also teach, or not teach, but I also speak to interns, so kind of all across the spectrum. And I get this question about work-life balance all the time from both ends of the spectrum. And my view is I don't even like the phrase work-life balance. I think it's misleading. I like the phrase work-life harmony, because I know that if I am energized at work, happy at work, feeling like I'm adding value, part of a team, whatever energizes you, that makes me better at home. It makes me a better husband, a better father, and likewise, if I'm happy at home, it makes me a better employee, a better boss, all the things. It's not primarily about, there may be crunch periods where it's about the number of hours in the week, but that's not the real thing. Usually it's about, do you have energy? And is your work depriving you of energy, or is your work generating energy for you? And there are people, everybody in this room knows people who fall into these two camps. You're in a meeting and the person comes in the room. Some people come into the meeting and they add energy to the meeting. Other people come into the meeting and the whole meeting just deflates. And those people they drain energy from the meeting. And you have to decide which of those kinds of people you're going to be. Are you going to add energy?
And the same thing at home.
And the same thing at home. And it's a wheel, it's a cycle, it's a flywheel, it's a circle, it's not a balance. Because a balance, that's why that metaphor is so dangerous, because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And you could be out of work, have all the time for your family in the world, but really depressed and demoralized about your work situation, and your family wouldn't want to be anywhere near you. They would wish you would take a vacation from them. And so it's not about the number of hours, not primarily. I suppose if you went crazy with 100 hours a week or something. Yeah, that maybe
Right.
maybe there are limits, and they probably. But I've never had a problem, and I think it's because both sides of my life give me energy, and that's what I would recommend. That's what I do recommend to interns and execs. When my wife and I got married, I had been eating a whole can for a couple of years. I had been eating for breakfast every morning a whole can of Pillsbury biscuits. So I would wake up in the morning, I would preheat the oven to 375. I would get out the baking sheet. I would crack open the Pillsbury biscuits, place them on there, and with butter. And I would eat the whole can. And I was skinny as a rail, and it was just. After watching me, so then we get married, and she watched me do this every morning as my spouse for like 3 months. And then she finally stopped me one day, and she said, "Do you know what's in that?" And I was like, honestly, that wasn't even a concept for me, that there was something in food. That there was like I had never read a nutrition label in my life. I ate what tasted good to me. And so she kind of showed me the ingredients label, and we had a little very rudimentary discussion about nutrition, and I stopped eating the biscuits.
Thanks for watching, my friend. You have seen best motivation video for 2021 for self-discipline and personal development with motivation music. And watch my another video for success and inspiration.